the first ever election. And Mayor says Mekelle City getting back to normalcy. Hello, this is Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Demeke Mekonnen, yesterday received the new UNFPA representative to Ethiopia, Denia Gael. On the occasion, Demeke appreciated the UNFPA for providing support to female Ethiopian refugees in Sudan. He addressed the representative's concern over the situation in Tigray and the government's assurance to protect civilians through the law enforcement process. He said the government has rapidly concluded the oppression and continued the rehabilitation and restoration of infrastructure that had been destroyed by the fugitives. According to the Denia Gael, the UNFPA is planning to extend support to women and children in the Tigray region. The UNFPA is the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency that supports women for safe childbirth, among other things. Ethiopia's much anticipated general parliamentary and regional election is expected to be the first ever, says a senior government official while talking to DW's Conflict Zone. Ethiopia's minister in charge of democratization, Zadig Abraha, said during the interview that the government is leveling up the ground for the event, which will take place sometime in mid-2021. Meanwhile, the minister dismissed allegations that the law enforcement operation in Tigray has drawn in outside actors in support of Ethiopia as baseless. Jerusalem Bazar takes us through the remainder of the interview.
Ethiopia's national and regional elections was originally scheduled to take place in August 2020, but postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the TPLF, which was at odds with the federal government up in Arat Kilo, went ahead with a sham election in September, declaring victory in all but one of the 152 regional seats. The event showed TPLF's utter disregard for the constitutionally established election board, which refused recognition to the exercise. Talking to Deutsche Welle's Conflict Zone, Zadig Abraha, Minister for Democratization, pointed out that Ethiopia has been preparing to hold the most democratic national election in its history. Discussions have been held with contesting political parties, he said.
This election is going to be one of the best and most democratic election Ethiopia has ever had. We have, more than 20 political groups were outlawed, were forbidden to come to Ethiopia. We have levied that. We have got rid of that restriction. They are now here in town, in Addis, in Ethiopia, moving freely. We are assisting our opposition parties to come together to challenge us in this election. For us, winning or losing this election is equally significant. If we lose this election, we will be the first party to accept the terms of a true competitive election and hand over power.
Concerning allegations by Western powers and some international media outlets that the conflict in Tigray has drawn international actors on the side of Ethiopia, Zadig said the Ethiopian Defense Force has full capacity to protect its people without any outside assistance.
Not at all. Our military establishment has been engaged in many African countries and keep in peacekeeping missions. We are more than capable of dealing with the TPLF. So it is an insult to our military establishment to say that we are depending on the help of the Eritrean army. I can assure you in 100% terms, in 1001% terms, there are no Eritrean armies operating in Tigray.
Zadig also took time to disprove the allegation that the government is trampling upon freedom of the press guaranteed in the constitution and the press law.
Ethiopia has more than ever committed itself to respecting press freedom. In Ethiopia, there are no journalists imprisoned because of their journalistic exercise. A journalist can happen to commit a crime on his individual capacity, not on his professional capacity. You cannot relieve someone from criminal prosecution just because he's a journalist. Journalism is not an immunity to run away from accountability that comes out of transgression of the law. It's not us that cuts the internet in Tigray. It is the TPLF that cuts the internet. There is a security camera footage released 2 days ago showing TPLF officials.
Currently, the government is trying to rebuild the infrastructure that the TPLF's infamous special force and the militia have destroyed and help restore normalcy in the region.
The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia says it is setting a tripartite platform with a view of addressing complaints lodged by political parties. The platform will include contesting opposition political parties, the government and the board itself. The board said the 6th general election, slated for mid-2021, will be guided by technologies, thereby identifying any potential security challenge. Alula Teklemara has more on the story.
In an exclusive interview with ETV, chairperson of the National Election Board of Ethiopia, Birtukan Mideksa, said the board is setting a tripartite podium with the view to address complaints by political parties. The new podium is expected to contribute its fair share in broadening the political sphere of the country, said Birtukan.
This tripartite platform was accepted during the meeting between political parties and the government. We presented the proposal in the meeting and the relevant actors endorsed it.
The chairperson underscored that the podium will help all 6 contribute to the success of the election.
It's very helpful for political parties to freely conduct election campaigns. Of course, the government and political parties set a dual security plan to be implemented in the election season. We thus have a chance to provide our suggestions in such communication chains.
Birtukan also expresses the government's commitment to in place a strategy of communication with the political parties in case of complaints.
Our Prime Minister stressed during the previous meeting that his administration will set a code of conduct that helps conduct fair and democratic election. We as Election Board welcome that and wait for. Of course, we can also review the importance of the code of conduct and we will reflect on it.
The upcoming general election will be guided by technologies, thereby identifying any potential security challenge, said Birtukan.
We are going to include civil societies, political parties, government and branches of the election board to peacefully undertake the coming general election.
The Ethio-Russia Joint Commission has reviewed the status of agreements signed between the two countries. Ethiopia's Minister of Education, Getachew Mokra, held discussions with Yevgeny Kiselyov, Russia's Deputy Minister of Natural Resources and Environment and head of the Federal Agency for Mineral Resources. They discussed economic, scientific, technical and trade cooperation, as well as reviewed the performance of the agreements inked between the leaders of the two countries in St. Petersburg in 2019. During the discussion, the ministers commended the role played by the Joint Commission in taking the ties between the two countries to the next level.
Policy Matters. Policy Matters is a conversation platform which aims to provide reasoned analysis and content to the activities, reforms and policies of the federal government of Ethiopia.
I think the Maikadra massacre alone will warrant holding the TPLF leadership as international terrorists, leave alone the 27 years of killings and humiliation and dehumanizing of the Ethiopian people. Coming from the Somali region, where for nearly 10 years the TPLF was committing something close to ethnic cleansing, and knowing the silence of the international community, I was left to wonder what considerations are there for the international communities when it comes to passing moral judgments and political positions on countries.
Policy Matters.
The Consortium of Reproductive Health Association, along with Multi-stakeholder partners celebrated the International Day for Universal Health Coverage here in Addis Ababa yesterday. The day was celebrated with an assortment of events to increase awareness of the strong and resilient health systems as well as universal health coverage in Ethiopia. Kasan Jane reports.
During the discussions on the event, it was stated that raising awareness regarding strong and resilient health systems is mandatory. Moreover, working with multi-stakeholder partners is said to be pivotal to accelerate progress towards universal health coverage, UHC in Ethiopia. Speaking on the occasion, Sarah Masale, deputy country representative of UNFPA, said the UNFPA has already been on the ground before, during and after crisis, working closely with governments and JOS, UN agencies and other partners.
Where world leaders made a political declaration recommitting to achieving universal health coverage by 2030. The declaration re-emphasized the right to health for all and a commitment to achieving universal access to sexual and reproductive health services and reproductive rights as stated in the Sustainable Development Goals. The statement issued at the ICPD summit last year in Nairobi also called for achieving universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights as part of universal health coverage. It committed to strive for zero preventable maternal deaths and maternal mortality, and zero unmet need for family planning, information and services, and access to comprehensive and age-responsive information, education, and youth-friendly quality services for all young people.
The UNFPA country deputy representative called on leaders to make big and smarter investment in health and encourage diverse groups to make commitments to help move closer to universal health coverage. A consultant at the UNFPA on his part highlighted the assessment on sexual and reproductive health, which is a key issue in the emergency response to the coronavirus disease COVID-19 outbreak in a context of Ethiopia.
People are utilizing the national guidelines and the strategies of safe abortion service is not provided in many of the public hospitals.
It was also stated on the occasion that priority should be given to sexual and reproductive health, SRH, and rights as a significant public health issue. He said that this pandemic is still evolving, adding that it is urgent for the scientific community to generate solid clinical, epidemiological, and psychosocial behavioral links between COVID-19 and SRH and rights outcomes.
Ethiopia has been making remarkable progress over the past 15 years in saving and improving the lives of women and young people, and thanks to the strategic leadership of the Ministry of Health. Most changes around RH in our country have been achieved with the commitment of the government of Ethiopia and relentless work to make sure that no one is left behind.
Ethiopia is mourning the death of Tesfaye Gassese, a theatrical art professor at the Addis Ababa University and a stage and film actor. Tesfaye passed away on Wednesday at the age of 84. He was a scriptwriter for dozens of stage plays and other author of several books. Also, he acted in several stage plays and Ethiopian films. Gosha Melissa presents the following biographic account.
The legendary writer, director, actor and player Tesfaye Gassese immensely contributed to the development of Ethiopian modern theater. Tesfaye was famous for his works Matakeja, Telahungizau, Ikau, Yeshi, Abatna Lij, Lakachina Desta, and Tahadiso, among others. Born in 1936 at a place called Gorugutu in Hararge, Tesfaye was regarded as one of the most important exponents of Ethiopian modern theater. During his career that spanned 40 years, he has been an actor, director, and theater administrator. He wrote and directed several plays which have a great relevance in the modern history of Ethiopian culture. Tesfaye started his theater career in the 1950s as a young university student. His promise got him a scholarship at the Northwestern University's Theater School in Evanston, Illinois, where he studied in the late 1950s.
We played it to the student community, and then apparently they recommended it to be presented at the National Theatre, at the Haile Selassie First Theatre, it was.
The emperor himself was to be present.
Yes, he did attend the performance. He liked my performance, and the next day he called me to his palace, where now the university is. He told me he appreciated my performance, took off his watch, gave it to me.
On returning to Ethiopia, he was a part of a small group of reformers who in the late 1960s turned theater from an art form aimed at propagandizing for the aristocracy into a means for examining the political and social situation in Ethiopia. In 1960, he became associated with the Haile Selassie First Theatre, which had been initially founded by Emperor Haile Selassie primarily for his own entertainment, but whose direction was being changed to focus on everyday concerns by newly appointed director Sagai Gebremadhin.
Actually, it was opposite even from my relatives. When I told them I had joined the National Theatre, they thought I had a white-collar job in an office and that sort of thing. I invited them for the opening of this performance, and they were seated in the front, of course. And the first thing, when the curtain opened and when one of my cousins saw me on the stage, he said, "Wait, Tesfaye?" This is what he was shocked.
What happened?
What happened? How you see?
Tesfaye became Director General of Hagar Fikr Theatre in 1974. In 1975, he was suspended and sent to prison by the newly installed Derg government after his play Igao, which criticized state terrorism. A funeral service was held at the National Theatre this morning. The body of Tesfaye Gassese was laid to rest at the Holy Trinity Cathedral today with the presence of his family, friends, and colleagues.
That was Binyam Alamayo presenting the story. The new mayor of Mekelle city, Atakilti Haile Selassie, said the city is getting back to normalcy. Talking to the Ethiopian press agency, the mayor added that participatory activities being carried out in collaboration with the National Army to ensure that livelihood of residents is fully restored to previous state. According to EPA, the new Mekelle city mayor further stated that following the completion of the law enforcement in the region, the interim administration is working closely with the federal government in resuming various social services and re-establishing stability in the city. The mayor expressed confidence that the city will be getting to full normalcy within a short time. He underlined that joint activities of the interim administration of Tigray and the federal government has brought about better results in restoring peace and resuming social services in the city.
ባሌ የምትታወቅበት የቱሪስት ቦታ ድሬሽ ኩሴን ይባላል። ይሄ ባህላዊ የእምነት ስርዓት የሚካሄድበት ቦታ ነው። ኤባዳ አዳዲያ ኤባዳ አዳዲ ሜና ዶራ አንጋቲና አዛም ኖሮሚያ
ክርስቲያን ይመጣል ከተለያዩ ሀገራት ከአራቱ ማዕዘናት ሁሉም ሰው ይመጣል እዚህ ቦታ ላይ አንዱ አንዱን አይመታም አንዱ አንዱን አይሰድብም አንዱን ሞግሶ አንዱን አያርቅም ለምን ኑረና ሁሴን የዲሞክራቲክ ሰው ስለሆኑ ማለት ነው ቢኪያ ገና ማለ ገልገላለ ሀተራተ ሰንጅራ ኑምባስናላቲ Numbasinaalaatti nu darbaa gaaddisa dhiiraa jalatti.
ይሄ ቦታ አሁን ነውራ ይሄ ነጩ የሚበጣበጥበት ቦታ ነበር። በፊት ሮቶ ምናምን በርሜል ሳይኖር እዚህ ተጠቀሙ ነበር ማለት ነው። ይሄ
And in business, Moroccan ambassador to Ethiopia, Nazia Alawi Mohammadi, said her country is committed to bolster ties with Ethiopia in various sectors. The ambassador commended the new Ethiopia's investment proclamation for creating conducive environment for African investments. Alula Teklemarim reports.
Ethiopia and Morocco have a long-standing friendship and cooperative relationship, which is moving to new levels of practical cooperation underpinned with economic sphere. That's why the North African nation Morocco chose Ethiopia for its biggest investment outside its borders, which amounts over $2.5 billion. Morocco, on behalf of its ambassador Nazia Alawi, also expresses to bolster ties with Ethiopia in different investment opportunities.
So the economic ties are very important to strengthen the bilateral cooperation and also to know each other. During His Majesty's visit, we have signed 12 agreements in which the Dridawa fertilizer plant, which is now implemented by the OCP group, a Moroccan group in fertilizer, with an amount of $2.5 billion, which is the biggest investment, Moroccan investment out of Morocco, and it shows how Ethiopia is very important for us as a strategic partner, not only at the bilateral level in general, but for economic purpose. And it is also a good example to show how two African countries are working together in a strategic field such as food security or food sovereignty.
The ambassador further applauded Ethiopian Investment Commission's initiative to raise African investors' concern regarding investment opportunities in Ethiopia.
It shows, as I said, the willingness from AIC to open a channel of communication, to engage a dialogue with us. And it shows also that the South-South cooperation is very important for the Ethiopian policy, as it is for us in Morocco. As I said, it is a common parameters between Morocco and Ethiopia, how two African countries can work together, can share expertise, and can show that investing in other African countries, it's possible and should be done.
Ambassador Nezalawi underscored the importance of cooperation among African nations to garner achievements from the investment sector.
It is very important to make information accessible to investors, to embassies, and to commercial attaches, especially in our African countries' embassies here in Ethiopia. It marks a beginning of a fruitful interaction, and it marks also a real willingness from EIC to engage a dialogue and an interaction with the African countries. The proposal of Mrs. Leli Seneme to create an African investors platform or African investors association is very interesting in my opinion, and it will create a space or a platform for all of us to discuss, to raise our concern, and also to make sure that this dialogue will be sustainable.
Ethiopia and Morocco signed 12 agreements on different areas in 2016, of which the $2.5 billion investment of Dredao fertilizer complex is one of the biggest deals between the two nations.
Ethiopia is in the midst of economic reform activities to accelerate the country's economic growth and development. Legal reform of the investment sector is an integral part of this initiative. The Ethiopian Investment Commission announced that new features in the legal reform of the investment sector during an engagement with the North American investors. The legal reform is meant to make the investment climate more attractive, it was further pointed out.
The main intention for this discussion is the country is undergoing in economic reform and other reforms. So one of the economic reform is investment law reform. There is a huge or a significant adjustment to the investment law, which is a shift from positive list to negative list, which means it opens an opportunity for foreign direct investors. So it gives opportunity for foreign direct investment to engage in the open up sectors.
Board President of the American Chamber of Commerce in Ethiopia, Ermias Ishetu, says the change in the environment enables dividend returns to the nation.
This reform will lead towards doing more investment into the country, attracts more foreign direct investment, and therefore it ultimately supports Ethiopia's aspiration to build its economy and to be competitive in the global market. And we will work hard as American Chamber to attract more American investors to Ethiopia. It is a very positive opportunity ahead. There's numerous opportunities for American investors, and we invite many Americans to come and invest, hopefully.
American investors, for their part, said the legal reform is expected to lessen the restrictive characters of the previous investment law and policy.
The investment law does not allow what I say more restrictive. So as we discussed today, we're very glad to hear Ethiopian government spend more time to reform the investment law and then more receptive, getting more receptive rather than restrictive. Hopefully the new process change, making a shorter process and making it more robust, and then making it more easy to the foreign investor will help Ethiopian to have more foreign investment. And then I really appreciate the government now start working on those investment reform.
Well, that's it for the news. For me, Solomon Dang and the rest of the English team here in the studio. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.